All right, it is now a full-blown psychosis. It is a psychological, level of unhingement I've never seen. Trump derangement syndrome, out of control. Remember, if your dog bites, if the bee stings, if the baby cries and you're feeling sad, it's all President Trump's fault. If he literally cures cancer, they will never give him credit in the media. Now, according to the editorial board of the New York Times, Hurricane Florence is also President Trump's fault. I'm not making this up. Look at the headline on your screen. Another hurricane is about to batter our coast. Trump is complicit. The Washington Post, by the way, not the New York Times. Believe it or not, that headline, it's not just clickbait. The Washington Post actually laid out a case in the editorial for why President Trump is responsible for bad weather. Look at this quote. When it comes to extreme weather, Mr. Trump is complicit. He plays down humans' roles in increasing the risks, and he continues to dismantle efforts to address those risks. Not only is the claim totally absurd, it's also factually wrong, not that they really care. The American Enterprise Institute.org, AEI.org, they put out in President Trump's first year in office, the U.S. reduced CO2 emissions more than any other country in the world. So Trump derangement syndrome is now reached a new height. These people are just downright sick in their obsession to hate the president. The slogan from the Washington Post is, democracy dies in darkness. Sadly, the final nail in the coffin for democracy, journalism, if you will, is the kind of blinding anti-Trump hatred that is on display from them and all their friends in the media almost every day. Now, maybe instead of blaming President Trump for bad weather and a hurricane, maybe the mainstream media could focus on the biggest abuse of power scandal in our history. And thanks tonight to the former FBI lovebirds, Page and Strzok, we have even more evidence that your government was leaking sensitive information, to destroy Trump from the get-go. First, to prevent him from becoming president, then to destroy his presidency. We showed you earlier this week the newly uncovered text messages revealing a 2017 media link strategy with the FBI coordinating with the DOJ. Sarah Carter also discovering that Strzok and Page were working on a Russian interference op-ed in the lead up to the 2016 election. So there was leaking not only by the FBI and the DOJ before the election, again, to prevent Trump from winning, after the election to destroy a duly elected president of you, the people. Now, Sarah Carter has obtained even more new texts from Strzok detailing his cozy relationship, with the New York Times and one of its reporters, Mike Schmidt. April 14, 2017, Strzok texting, quote, also, apparently the Times is angry with us about the Washington Post scoop, an earlier discussion that we had about the Schmidt piece that had so many inaccuracies. Too much to detail here, but I told Mike, redacted, and Andy, they need to understand we were absolutely dealing in good faith with them. Strzok then follows up that text with, quote, the FISA one coupled with the Guardian piece from yesterday. The FISA one. That's right, Peter Strzok was helping the New York Times with a story on the supposedly top-secret FISA court. This is beyond bad. Supposedly, he's running the investigation. What does it say about the New York Times? What does it say about the Washington Post? All you need is one anti-Trump official to hand them propaganda, misinformation, distorted lies from a known Trump hater at this point, blow it up, act as though it's gospel truth. That's the paper of record. Where are the corrections? When are they coming? Don't hold your breath. Now, we did reach out to the DOJ, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Strzok and Page for comment. We've yet to get a response. But tonight we have brand new, never before seen text messages. It now appears that on top of, the Director of National Intelligence, the FBI and DOJ colluding in all this and leaking to the press, seems like the CIA, they too were involved in the same kind of illicit leaking. And, yeah, we're talking about you, Mr. Sanctimony, John Brennan. FoxNews.com just obtained brand new texts showing that some officials were, quote, leaking like mad in the lead up to the FBI's Russia probe. Why? To influence public opinion. Take a look at this exchange. This is just after the president got elected, December 15th, 2016. There they are again. Lisa Page texting Strzok, quote, oh, remind me to tell you tomorrow about the Times doing a story about the RNC hacks. Strzok responding, quote, and more than they already did? I told you that Quinn told me that they're pulling all the stops out on some story. He then followed up, quote, think our sisters have begun leaking like mad, scorned and worried and political. They're kicking into overdrive. According to reporting from our own Catherine Herridge, the sisters that they're referring to that Strzok mentioned, well, that likely is the CIA. That would be John Brennan and Barack Obama's CIA. Less than a month after that exchange, the New York Times published a story about RNC hacks. And on the very same day, BuzzFeed published the Steele dossier filled with Russian lies that Hillary paid for. So you have Strzok referring to the CIA, pulling out all the stops, saying the CIA is scorned and that they're political and they're leaking like mad. Less than a month later, the dossier becomes public. Now, is this the kind of politically motivated leaking from our most trusted government officials? Is that acceptable, John Brennan? I hate to say that Chuck Schumer's right, but if you go against the intelligence community, they'll get you 6 ways and Sunday. Why? Because the deep state, with the power that they have, intelligence-wise, it's like a house of cards. We're watching the whole scheme come tumbling down, revealing a level of corruption in your government that should make you sick and concerned. And as it turns out, high-ranking deep state officials, they weren't the only people rocked by the election of Donald Trump. Look at Breitbart.com. They obtained official video from inside a 2016 company-wide meeting at the tech giant Google. This was following Trump's win. Now, if you thought the good people of Google weren't biased and against all things Trump, well, this should make you think again. Let's take a look.
You know, let's face it, most people here are pretty upset and pretty sad for because of the election.
That was the first moment I really felt like we were going to lose. And it was this massive, kick in the gut that we were going to lose. And it was really painful.
We'll be very strong and vocal and, not just, from a press standpoint or a PR standpoint, but actually working hard behind the scenes to stand up for what's right.
I think it's worth being very vigilant and thinking about all these issues. What can we do to lead to maybe a better quality of governance, decision-making, and so forth?
Is there anything positive you see from this election result?
Boy, that's a really tough one right now.
Google, fair and balanced, just like the New York Times and the Washington Post, and just like all those deep state actors. They responded to the release of that video in part, quote, nothing was said at that meeting or any other meeting to suggest that any political bias ever influences the way we build and operate our products. And of course, judging from what we just saw, well, we could show you an hour more of exactly the same thing. Virtually nobody, at least no one in a position of power at Google, wanted Donald Trump to win. Sounds like the CIA, FBI, DOJ, and, yeah, the Director of National Intelligence under Obama. According to what we just saw, many actively working against the president and against the candidate. And yet we're just supposed to believe them that there's no political bias and their bias doesn't impact any of Google's products. They literally held a funeral for our country at a company-wide meeting the day after Donald Trump won. We'll have more on that developing story throughout the hour. But first, all right, the countdown continues. It's all in your hands. This is where we, the people, have all the power. In 55 days, the Trump agenda will move full steam ahead or it will stop dead in its tracks. You get to decide. Now, some of these races will literally be decided by just a handful of votes. Let's take a look.
I'll just list you a bunch of races that are dead even. Arizona, Nevada, Tennessee, Montana, North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, West Virginia, and Florida. All of them too close to call, and every one of them like a knife fight in an alley. I mean, just a brawl in every one of those places.
This is a time when your vote's going to matter. Do you care? Would you like the Trump agenda to continue? Do you like the records on the economy we keep talking about? A lot is on the line. A lot is at stake in this midterm election. 55 days away. Look at this map. If you're in one of these states, you literally will decide whether the Republicans run the Senate or Chuck Schumer, who says we can't impeach Trump soon enough, will run the Senate. You will decide if the Trump agenda moves through Congress. You will decide if originalists, constitutionalists, judges continue to be confirmed. And look very closely at this. If you live in one of these House districts, we'll run it really slow. You will decide whether or not the president's will face impeachment because that's what Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer have promised. Yeah, there's a lot in play here. It's that serious. You've heard it from all of them. They want to impeach the president. On my radio show earlier today, the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, said Republicans, they need a national election. They need to sign off on a unified agenda in order to secure victory. Now, we often talk about the 5 things the Democrats are going to do if they win. Let's see, impeach the president. They want their crumbs back. They want a tax increase. They want to keep Obamacare. That's worked out so well for so many of you, paying more, losing your doctors and losing your plans. Of course, they want to eliminate ICE. They want open borders. Well, what are the things Republicans ought to sign on to and promise to you if they get elected? Maybe one, it could be to follow through on the Trump agenda. Number 2, secure the border wall and fund the wall fully. Maybe they can support the president's choice for constitutionalists, originalists on the court so that you don't have people literally legislating from the bench, or vote to make the tax cuts permanent. Why shouldn't they be permanent? It's good for the economy. We'll have more information about that in a minute. Dismantle Obamacare, replace it with better plans, for example, that have more choices. Healthcare savings accounts give you more power. Healthcare cooperatives, like our good friend down in Wichita, Kansas, Dr. Josh Umber, Atlas MD, $50 a month, unlimited care, and he negotiates 95% reductions for any medicines you might need. Also, how about making America energy independent? We use all our resources available. We got more than the entire world combined. It'd be good for national security. It keeps us safe. It'll be good for the economy. It will create millions of high-paying career jobs for Americans, and in the process, wealth for Americans, so they can buy a nice car, a nice house, in a safe neighborhood, and send their kids to whatever they want to send them to. Republicans also, they've got to promote just how effective Donald Trump has been in the last 19 months. Just today, get this, look at this. We learned that U.S. median income rose to a record high during the president's first year in office. Poverty rate also fell during the president's first year. Millions fewer on food stamps, about 4 million fewer, 4 million new jobs. We have more manufacturing jobs than we've seen in 25 years. Jobs said Obama was never coming back. This country is literally booming under the president's leadership. And as that happens, good news is bad for the Democrats that want their power back, because we had 8 years of failure under their policies and under Obama's policies. And on top of that, guess what? America could still be even more prosperous. 14 states, record low unemployment for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, 65-year low for women in the workforce, youth unemployment, 55-year low. On top of this, watch all the left, they're getting unhinged. They are desperate. You got a guy in California actually trying to stab a GOP congressional candidate at his campaign stand. Police in Washington, D.C. investigating a threat to commit a mass shooting at a Make America Great event in Trump International Hotel. A Wyoming GOP office was set on fire less than 2 days after it opened. Senator Susan Collins, she's received over 3,000 coat hangers as she prepares to vote in the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh. And her staff has reportedly been receiving vulgar and threatening phone calls and promises to fund any opponents she may have. Not a good climate for people that support Trump. The rhetoric on the left, I don't blame those people, but certainly it's having an impact on those that have a tendency to be crazy. Now, before something horrible happens, maybe they should stop telling people on the left to be getting in people's faces and chasing Pam Bondi and Sarah Sanders and her kids and Secretary Nielsen out of restaurants.